My name is Martha, and I'm 54 years old. I've always loved Christmas, the lights, the carols, the laughter that fills every room. But that year, the holiday spirit felt like a distant dream. My daughter Clara and I hadn't spoken much since she married Ethan 3 years ago. I used to think he was charming, well-mannered, polite, successful. The kind of man any mother would want for her daughter. But once the wedding glitter faded, so did his mask. Behind closed doors, he became cold, sharp, and controlling. Slowly, Clara drifted away from me, always defending his behavior, saying he was just stressed from work. I could see her losing her spark, but every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd pull away. "Mom, please," she'd whisper. "You don't understand him." Maybe I didn't. But I knew pain when I saw it. The last Christmas we spent together, Clara had seemed tense. She smiled, but her eyes looked hollow. Ethan barely acknowledged me, spending most of the evening on his phone. When I hugged Clara goodbye that night, I told her I loved her. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, as if she were already somewhere else. This year, I had accepted that she wouldn't be visiting. I decorated a small tree, baked cookies, and tried to keep myself busy. Still, the silence in the house was heavy. Around midnight, my phone buzzed on the table. I expected it to be a holiday message from an old friend, but instead, the text came from an unknown number. "Your daughter needs you." I froze. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, maybe even a cruel prank. But something about those words unsettled me. I tried calling Clara, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, telling her to call me back. Minutes passed, then an hour. The clock ticked past 2 a.m., and the snow outside began to fall in thick, quiet sheets. I sat by the window, watching it pile up on the driveway, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Mother always knows when something is wrong. By morning, the storm had turned fierce, but I couldn't sit still anymore. I packed a thermos of coffee, grabbed my coat, and decided to drive to Clara's house. It was about 40 minutes away, but the roads were nearly impassable with snow. I drove slowly, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. With every mile, my anxiety grew heavier. When I finally turned onto her street, I could barely make out the houses through the flurries. But I recognized hers. Warm light glowed from the windows, and faint music drifted through the air. For a moment, relief washed over me. She was home. She was safe. But as I pulled up to the curb, something didn't feel right. The front yard was untouched, no footprints, no tire marks. My relief twisted into confusion. I stepped out of the car, the wind biting at my face. That's when I saw her. Clara stood by the front door, wearing nothing but a thin sweater and pajama pants. Her hair was wet with snow, her skin pale and trembling. My heart stopped. I called out her name, my voice cracking in the cold air. She turned slowly, and when I saw her face, tears froze against her cheeks. Behind her, through the frosted glass of the window, I saw shadows, moving, people laughing, eating, drinking. And one voice, deep and mocking, rose above the rest, Ethan's. My daughter was locked outside her own home on Christmas morning. As I ran to her, the sound of laughter from inside grew louder, crueler, and I realized I was about to face the man who thought he could treat my child like she was nothing. My heart nearly stopped when I saw my daughter's blue lips and tears frozen to her cheeks. "Clara!" I cried, rushing toward her. She flinched when I touched her shoulders, as if even my warmth burned her chilled skin. I pulled my coat off and wrapped it around her trembling body. "What happened? Why are you out here?" I demanded, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her teeth chattered as she tried to speak, the words catching in her throat. He said I needed to calm down," she whispered finally. Her voice was barely audible over the wind. "He locked me out. Said I was ruining Christmas dinner." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Locked her out? My own daughter? On Christmas morning? I turned toward the window again. Inside, I could see Ethan standing near the fireplace, laughing with his parents. He looked relaxed, perfectly composed, as if he hadn't just banished his wife into a snowstorm. The sight made my stomach twist. I guided Clara toward my car. "Come on, sweetheart. You need to warm up. We're going home. But she froze, her hands clutching the edges of my coat tighter. Mom, please, she whispered. Don't make a scene. He'll be angry if he sees you. That word angry hit me like a slap. I recognized the fear in her eyes. It was the same fear I'd once seen in my own mother's face before she finally left my father. He can't hurt you anymore, I told her firmly. But she shook her head. You don't understand, she murmured. He just gets upset sometimes. I shouldn't have talked back. My heart ached hearing her defend him. She was shivering so hard I could feel it through my coat. Clara, I said softly, brushing the snow from her hair. No one deserves this. Not ever. Her eyes darted toward the house again. Through the glass, I saw Ethan glance in our direction. He smirked, raised his glass, and turned back to his guests, as if nothing were wrong. That was it. Something inside me snapped. Stay here, I said, squeezing Clara's hand before striding up the walkway. She grabbed my sleeve, her voice panicked. Mom, don't, please. But I didn't stop. The snow crunched under my boots as I reached the door and pounded hard. The laughter inside quieted for a moment. I pounded again. Finally, the door swung open. And there he stood, Ethan. He looked at me like I was an unexpected delivery. Well, he said with a smirk. Look who finally decided to show up. Why is my daughter outside? I snapped. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, acting amused. She needed some air, he said smoothly. We had a little disagreement, and she got dramatic. You know how Clara can be. I could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the faint flush on his cheeks. Behind him, his mother sat stiffly on the couch, pretending not to hear. You locked her out in a snowstorm? I demanded. Are you insane? He chuckled, shaking his head. You really shouldn't interfere, Martha. This is between husband and wife. No, I said, stepping closer. This is between a coward and the woman he's trying to break. His smirk faltered. Get out of my house, he hissed. I took another step forward. Open the door and apologize to her, I said through clenched teeth. Right now. He didn't move. Behind me, I heard Clara's weak voice call out, Ethan, please. He looked past me, his face twisting in annoyance. You see? She's fine, he said. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. My blood boiled. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. Then you won't mind if I call the police and let them decide. His smirk disappeared. The muscles in his jaw tightened, his posture stiffened. For the first time that night, Ethan didn't look amused, he looked worried. And that's when I knew the battle had only just begun. Ethan's smug face made my blood boil, but I forced myself to speak with control. I dealt with arrogant men before men who thought they could hide cruelty behind charm. But Ethan's calm, condescending tone made my skin crawl. He leaned on the doorframe, eyes gleaming with mockery. You really want to call the police on Christmas? He asked, his smirk returning. Imagine how that'll look, a hysterical mother interrupting family dinner. I didn't flinch. Imagine how it'll look when they find out you left your wife to freeze outside her own home. I shot back. For a moment, I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of unease he quickly disguised with another grin. Behind him, the warmth of the living room felt almost sinister. The soft glow of the fireplace, the clinking of glasses, the smell of roast turkey. His parents sat quietly, pretending to be invisible. Ethan, I said, lowering my voice. You crossed a line tonight. Let her go. He sighed dramatically. Clara, honey, he called out. You can come in now if you promise to behave. I turned and saw Clara standing a few feet away, wrapped in my coat, shaking her head in disbelief. Behave? She echoed, her voice trembling. You locked me out for an hour. Because you embarrassed me in front of my parents. He snapped. You started yelling about nothing. Nothing? Clara whispered. Her lips quivered, but I could see anger rising behind her tears. You insulted me, Ethan. You told everyone I didn't know how to be a wife. He shrugged. It was a joke. I stepped between them before the situation could spiral further. A joke doesn't end with someone freezing, I said sharply. Ethan's smirk dropped again. You think you can come in here and tell me how to handle my marriage? I think I can tell you when you've become abusive, I said. His face reddened instantly. You'd better watch what you say. No, I said firmly. You should. He stepped closer, towering over me, his breath hot with whiskey. For a split second, I wondered if he might actually hit me. But I held my ground. Behind me, Clara sobbed quietly. You need to leave, he hissed. This isn't your house. I raised my phone higher. If you touch me or her, it'll be the police's problem. His mother suddenly stood from the couch, face pale. Ethan, she said softly. Maybe you should just let her go home. He turned to her, his voice sharp. Stay out of it, Mom. That told me everything. Even his own parents were afraid of him. I took a deep breath and said, Clara, get your things. Ethan blocked the hallway instantly. She's not going anywhere. Move, I demanded. He didn't. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered, You're making things worse for her. I stared into his eyes and said, No, you already did that. He laughed a cruel, hollow sound. You think you're some kind of hero? You'll ruin her life with your meddling. I clenched my jaw. You already ruined it when you took away her freedom. His smirk faltered again. For a long moment, we stood in silence, tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Then he muttered, You have 5 seconds to get out. And you have 5 seconds to move, I replied. He took one threatening step forward, and that's when I pressed the button on my phone. The sound of the dial tone filled the air. 911, what's your emergency? Came the voice on speaker. Ethan froze mid-step, his eyes darting toward the phone. You wouldn't dare, he growled. Try me, I said coldly. And for the first time since I'd known him, Ethan didn't have a single word to say. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Ethan's eyes. It was quick, almost invisible, but I caught it. That tiny tremor in his jaw, the way his eyes darted to his parents as if looking for backup. You don't need to call them, he said quickly, his tone forced calm. Let's just talk like adults. But I didn't lower my phone. We're done talking, I said firmly. You crossed a line tonight. Behind him, his mother wrung her hands, whispering something to her husband. His father looked pale, nervous, like he'd seen this before. Clara took a hesitant step forward, her voice shaking. Mom, please, it's okay. I just want to leave. You're not leaving, Ethan snapped, turning on her with a glare so sharp it made her flinch. I took a step between them. You will not speak to her like that again, I warned. He scoffed, but I saw the muscles in his neck tighten. You think this is abuse? You have no idea what you're talking about. I leveled my voice. Then explain why your wife is standing outside in 20-degree weather. He didn't answer. He just stared, his jaw grinding. The operator on the other end of the line asked if I needed assistance. Yes, I said clearly, keeping my eyes on Ethan. I'm at my daughter's house. Her husband locked her outside during a snowstorm. Ethan's composure cracked. Hang up that phone right now, he shouted. His father suddenly stood. Ethan, stop, he said sternly. Let them go. Ethan turned on him next. You two, stay out of this. His mother began crying quietly, muttering, This isn't who you are. But we all knew it was exactly who he was. Clara clung to my arm. Mom, let's go, she whispered. Please. The police are on their way, I said. We'll leave after they arrive. Ethan took a step forward, and instinctively, I positioned myself between him and my daughter. You're making a mistake, he hissed. You're blowing this all out of proportion. She's my wife. No, I said, my voice shaking but steady. She's my daughter. And she deserves better than you. He opened his mouth to respond. But Clara suddenly spoke. Her tone small but filled with years of buried pain. I'm tired, Ethan, she said. Tired of being scared. Tired of pretending everything's fine. He blinked, stunned. As if her words had slapped him harder than any physical blow. Don't do this, he warned. You'll regret it. No, Clara said softly. You will. I reached for her hand, and together we began moving toward the door. Ethan blocked the path again, his face twisted with rage. You're not taking her anywhere, he shouted, his voice cracking. His hand shot out, grabbing Clara's wrist. She gasped in pain. Without thinking, I shouted, "Let her go!" and shoved him back with all the force I had. He stumbled, shocked more than hurt, but his eyes darkened with fury. You crazy old... He started, but he stopped when I lifted the phone again, still on the line. Did you hear that? I asked the operator. He just grabbed her. Officers are 2 minutes away, she replied calmly. Ethan froze, breathing hard. The sound of sirens faint but growing closer in the distance. His parents stood motionless, faces pale. Clara was crying quietly now, her hand red where he'd gripped her. This is over, I said, my voice trembling from both rage and relief. You'll never touch her again. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the snowy street. Ethan looked toward the door, realization dawning too late. And in that tense silence, as blue and red lights flickered through the windows, I saw the moment he understood his control over her was slipping away forever. The flashing red and blue lights painted Ethan's smug world in chaos. When the police burst through the door, the warmth of the house seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, heavy stillness. 2 officers stepped in, boots crunching against the hardwood floor. Ethan's smirk wavered for the first time that night. Sir, one officer said firmly, step aside, please. Ethan threw up his hands. This is ridiculous. We were having a family argument. She's overreacting. His voice was loud, defensive, but underneath the bluster, I could hear the crack in it. The officers didn't look convinced. Ma'am, the taller one said to me, can you tell us what happened? I nodded, still trembling slightly. He locked my daughter outside during snowstorm, I explained. For over an hour. She's freezing. The officer turned to Clara, his expression softening. Is that true, miss? Clara hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Ethan. He glared at her, a silent warning. Don't be afraid, I whispered, squeezing her hand. Tell them. She swallowed hard. Yes, she said finally. He did. He said I needed to calm down. The room fell silent. Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms. You see? She's being dramatic again. It wasn't that cold. She was yelling at me in front of my parents. I just needed some peace. By locking her outside? The officer asked sharply. She's your wife, not a dog. Ethan's father closed his eyes, shaking his head. Officer, he began quietly. It's true. He did it. Ethan spun toward his father, disbelief flashing in his eyes. You're siding with them now? Enough, his father said, his voice trembling. You went too far. Ethan's mother was crying softly in the corner. I could almost feel her shame filling the air. Sir, the officer said, stepping closer. We'll need you to come with us for questioning. For questioning? Ethan repeated, stunned. On Christmas? Yes, sir. Now. Ethan tried to laugh it off. You can't be serious. But the officer was already pulling out his handcuffs. I'm very serious. Clara gasped as the metal clicked around his wrists. Ethan's eyes widened, panic bleeding into his arrogance. You don't understand, he shouted. She's my wife. She needs me. No, I said quietly, stepping closer. She needs to be safe. He turned his glare on me, fury replacing fear. You did this. You ruined everything. You ruined it the moment you thought love meant control, I replied, my voice shaking. The officers led him outside, his shouts muffled by the swirling snow. For the first time, the house was silent painfully, beautifully, silent. Clara collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom, I'm so sorry, she cried. You were right, I should have listened. I stroked her hair, holding her as tightly as I could. No, baby, you don't have to apologize for his cruelty. He's not going to stop, she whispered. You don't know him. I looked toward the window, where the police car lights still flashed across the snow. "He won't get near you again," I said. "I'll make sure of it." We stayed like that for a while, mother and daughter, surrounded by the wreckage of what was supposed to be a joyful home. Ethan's laughter had finally been silenced, but the echoes of it still lingered in the corners. "Let's go," I whispered eventually. "You're coming home with me." Clara nodded weakly, still trembling. As we stepped outside, the cold air hit us again, but this time, it didn't feel cruel, it felt clean, the kind of cold that wipes away everything rotten. As I helped her into the car, she looked at me through tears. "Mom," she said quietly, "there's something I never told you about Ethan." I turned to her, my pulse quickening. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You don't know half of what he's done." And I knew our nightmare wasn't over yet. Her trembling voice carried a secret that shattered what little peace I'd found. The drive home was silent except for the faint hum of the heater and the crunch of snow beneath the tires. I didn't want to push her to speak, but her words echoed in my mind. "You don't know half of what he's done." When we finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was rising, casting pale gold over the snow-covered street. I helped Clara inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and made her a cup of tea. She held it with shaking hands, staring into the steam as if she could find courage there. "Clara," I said softly, sitting beside her, "what did you mean back there? What else has he done?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He's been watching me, Mom," she whispered. "Tracking me." I froze. "What do you mean, tracking you?" She swallowed hard. "He installed something on my phone months ago, a tracking app. I didn't even know until I saw it open by accident one day. Every time I went out, he'd ask where I'd been, who I was with. He always knew. He'd get angry if I stopped anywhere on my way home." I clenched my fists, fury bubbling under my skin. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shook her head. "I was scared. He said if I ever left or told anyone, he'd make sure I had nothing, no money, no place to go." "But you have me," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "You've always had me." She nodded weakly. "I didn't want to drag you into it." My heart ached for her, for all the nights she must have spent trapped in silence, believing she was alone. "You're safe now," I said. "He can't hurt you anymore." "You don't know him, Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "He always finds a way. Even when he's calm, he's planning something." I took her hands in mine. "Then we'll be smarter. We'll get the police involved again. I'll call Karen, she's a lawyer, she'll know what to do." Within the hour, Karen was on the phone, her tone crisp and reassuring. She told us to document everything: texts, emails, screenshots, and to apply for a restraining order immediately. Clara hesitated but agreed. After we hung up, I made her something to eat, but she barely touched it. She kept glancing at her phone, terrified it would light up with his name. That night, she finally dozed off on the couch, exhaustion pulling her under. I sat nearby, the lamp casting a soft glow, the sound of her breathing steady but fragile. I stared out the window, watching the snow fall in slow, lazy spirals. For the first time in years, my daughter was asleep somewhere safe, and I vowed to keep it that way. I must have drifted off, because when I woke, the clock read 2:17 a.m. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I glanced at Clara, still asleep, her face peaceful for once. I smiled faintly, until I heard it. A faint buzz from the coffee table. My phone screen lit up. A message. My stomach twisted as I picked it up. The number was unknown again. Just like before. I opened it. The message read, "You can't hide her forever." The cup in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Someone knew she was here. I looked toward the window, the night outside impossibly still, every shadow suddenly threatening. And as I stared at that glowing message, I realized the storm we'd escaped hadn't ended, it had only followed us home. The fear that gripped me that night was colder than the snow outside. My hands were shaking as I reread the message again and again, hoping I'd somehow imagined it, but it was real short, taunting, and full of menace. "You can't hide her forever." My first thought was Ethan. It had to be. Who else would know Clara was with me? I hurried to the window, my breath fogging the glass, scanning the dark street. Everything looked quiet, untouched. But the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like something holding its breath. I grabbed my phone and called the police. My voice trembled as I explained what had happened, reading the message aloud. The officer on the line confirmed that Ethan had been released on bail earlier that evening. My knees nearly gave out. "What do you mean, released?" I whispered. "He broke the law. He was arrested." "Yes, ma'am," the officer said regretfully. "But it's temporary until the court hearing. We advise you and your daughter to stay somewhere safe and report any contact immediately." My heart sank. The law might have seen Ethan as a free man, but I knew what he really was, a predator, circling his prey. I didn't wake Clara right away. She looked so peaceful for the first time in months, and I couldn't take that away from her yet. Instead, I sat by the window all night, keeping watch until the first light of dawn. When she finally stirred, I forced a smile and said softly, "Morning, sweetheart. We need to make a few calls today." Over breakfast, I told her about the message and Ethan's release. Her spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the bowl. "He's coming," she said, her eyes wide with panic. "He promised he'd find me if I ever left." I grabbed her hand. "He's not going to find you, not this time. We're doing things differently now." I called Karen again, and within hours, she helped us file for a restraining order. We attached the threatening text and details of everything Ethan had done. She also put us in contact with a victim's advocate who guided us through safety measures, changing passwords, securing our phones, and documenting every little incident. I installed new locks and motion-activated cameras around the house that same afternoon. Clara stayed close to me, jumping at every sound, every car that passed outside. I tried to stay strong for her, even though my own nerves felt like frayed wires. That evening, she sat on the couch, sketching quietly while I reviewed the footage from the new cameras. Everything looked normal. I almost allowed myself to relax until she asked, "Mom, do you think people like him ever change?" I looked at her, my heart aching. "No, honey," I said softly. "People like that don't change, but we can." She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Then I'll start changing now." For the first time, I saw a flicker of strength behind her fear. We spent the next few days rebuilding her sense of normalcy. She began journaling again, even laughing occasionally when we watched old holiday movies. But despite the calm, unease sat heavy in the back of my mind. On the fourth night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Clara froze by the kitchen window. "Mom," she whispered. I turned. "What is it?" Her face had gone pale. "There's a car," she said, voice trembling. "It's been parked across the street since morning." I moved beside her and looked through the blinds. The car sat motionless under a street lamp, engine running, headlights dimmed. I couldn't see inside. My stomach twisted. "It's probably nothing," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. We stood there, staring, neither of us breathing. The car didn't move. Then, just as I reached for my phone to call the police, the engine revved and the driver's silhouette turned toward our house. Ethan's car headlights cut through the darkness like eyes that refused to blink. The low rumble of the engine echoed through the empty street, vibrating in my chest like a threat. I could see Clara's reflection trembling beside mine in the window. "It's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He found us." I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mind was racing. How had he known where to look? We'd been so careful. No social media posts, no shared addresses, nothing. "Go upstairs," I said quietly. "Now." Clara hesitated. "Mom." "Go," I said again, this time sharper. She turned and hurried up the stairs, her footsteps light but quick. I watched the car. It didn't move. The engine idled like a growl that never ended. After what felt like an eternity, the headlights flicked off, and the driver's side door opened. My stomach dropped. A tall figure stepped out, bundled in a dark coat, face hidden by the shadows. I couldn't see his features, but I knew that stance. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "There's a man outside my house," I told the operator, trying to steady my breathing. "I believe it's my daughter's ex-husband. He's violating a restraining order." The operator asked me to stay on the line as officers were dispatched. I peeked through the blinds again. The figure was gone. The car door hung open, light spilling onto the snow. My throat went dry. "He's gone," I whispered into the phone. "I don't see him anymore." "Stay inside and lock the doors," the operator instructed. "Do not engage." I hung up and locked every bolt on the door, then checked the back door twice. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Upstairs, Clara was pacing near the window. "Is he still out there?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But the police are on their way." We waited. The house felt smaller with every minute that passed. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows. Every creak, every groan of the old floorboards made us jump. Then, the faint sound of tires crunching over snow broke the tension. A police cruiser pulling up to the curb. Relief washed through me as the red and blue lights strobed through the living room. I hurried to the door and opened it for the officers. "He was here," I said immediately. He got out of the car, but then disappeared. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, nodded and walked toward the parked vehicle. The other stayed with me, asking questions and jotting notes. After a few minutes, the first officer returned. "The car's registered to Ethan Price," he confirmed. My stomach turned. "But he's not in it," he continued. "The engine's still warm. He couldn't have gone far." Clara came down the stairs, her face pale. "He was watching us, wasn't he?" "We don't know yet," the officer said carefully. "We'll patrol the area tonight and leave an extra unit nearby for your protection." They stayed for nearly an hour, searching the perimeter, shining flashlights into every shadow. Nothing. Ethan had vanished into the cold night. When they finally left, the silence returned heavy, unnatural. I sat beside Clara on the couch, both of us too shaken to speak. Then, around midnight, a soft thud echoed from the porch. Clara's eyes met mine instantly. "Don't move," I whispered, standing up slowly. I opened the front door just enough to peek outside. A small box sat on the steps, half buried in snow. No one was around, the air was still. I hesitated, then picked it up and brought it inside. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a snow globe, tiny flakes swirling around a photo of Ethan and Clara smiling, locked in glass. My stomach twisted. "He's mocking us," I said softly. Clara's face went white. The snow globe slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor as she whispered, "He knows where we are." The shattered snow globes scattered across the floor like broken memories of a life Clara wanted to forget. The tiny photograph of her and Ethan lay among the shards, their smiling faces warped beneath the glass. Clara stood frozen, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "How did he get that picture?" she whispered. "It was from our honeymoon. He said he deleted it when I asked him to." I carefully picked up the frame inside the globe, turning it over. On the back, scrawled in Ethan's handwriting, were 3 words. "See you soon." A chill ran down my spine. "Don't touch anything," I said firmly. "This is evidence." I called the police immediately. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers returned to our house, one of them the same man from earlier. They photographed the box, the snow globe, the writing, everything. Clara sat on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, while I gave my statement. The officer sighed. "He's escalating," he said grimly. "You did the right thing calling us. We'll submit this to the investigation and push for an immediate court review of his bail." "He should be in jail," I said, unable to hide my anger. "How? Is this man walking free?" "The system moves slowly, ma'am," the officer said gently. "But we're keeping a close eye on him now. If he comes near you again, we'll have him." After they left, the house fell into a tense, uneasy silence. Clara sat staring at the broken pieces on the floor. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "He wants you scared," I said softly. "That's what this is. A game of power. But we're not going to play." She nodded faintly but didn't answer. That night, she barely slept. I could hear her pacing in the room next to mine, whispering to herself, as if trying to make sense of everything. I didn't sleep much either. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak in the house felt like a warning. Morning came, pale and cold. Clara was already sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. "Mom," she said quietly, "I want to go back to work." I looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? Maybe wait until—" "No," she interrupted softly. "He's taken enough from me. I can't just sit here waiting for him to ruin another day." There was a strength in her voice I hadn't heard in years. So I nodded. "Then we'll make sure it's safe. I'll drive you." Over the next week, life settled into something resembling normalcy. We added extra locks, installed a security system, and kept in close contact with the detective assigned to the case. Clara even smiled a few times, a small, fragile smile, but real. Still, I could tell the fear hadn't left her. It lived in the way she checked the windows every night, the way she jumped when the phone rang. One evening, while I was washing dishes, I heard her phone buzz on the counter. She frowned at the screen. "It's an unknown number," she said. "Don't answer," I told her. But her curiosity got the better of her. She swiped the screen and lifted the phone to her ear. I watched her expression change curiosity to fear, then to shock. "Who is this?" she whispered. Then her face drained of color. "Mom." She handed me the phone with shaking hands. I pressed it to my ear. At first, I heard only static. Then, a familiar voice cut through. "Ethan's. You can't protect her forever, Mom." My blood went cold. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "If you ever come near my daughter again." But the line went dead before I could finish. I stood there, shaking, staring at the darkened screen. Clara was crying again, her whole body trembling. I took her in my arms, holding her close. "It's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I could feel her heart racing against mine. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, and in that sound, I could almost hear his laughter, echoing in the cold. That call reignited the fire in me. I refused to live in fear of that man another second. I'd spent too many nights replaying Ethan's cruelty, watching it crush my daughter piece by piece. Now it was my turn to fight back. As soon as the sun rose, I called the detective assigned to our case, explaining every detail of the threatening phone call. "We'll trace it," he assured me. "If it came from a burner, we might not get much, but the more he contacts you, the stronger the case becomes." His calm professionalism steadied me, even as anger simmered beneath the surface. After hanging up, I turned to Clara, who sat at the kitchen table staring into her untouched coffee. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow from another sleepless night. "He's not winning," I said, setting my hand over hers. "We're going to end this." She looked up, her lips trembling. "He always wins, Mom. He's too careful. He knows how to twist everything so it looks like my fault." "Not this time," I said firmly. "He's already slipping. He wouldn't be taunting us if he wasn't desperate." I called Karen next, our lawyer, and explained the situation. She advised us to document everything: the call log, the threats, even the emotional toll. "If he's violating his bail conditions, that's leverage for an arrest warrant," she said. "But you need to stay vigilant. Keep every message, every detail." So that's what we did. We kept a folder on my desk with every piece of evidence neatly labeled a diary of his obsession. Meanwhile, Clara tried to hold on to normalcy. She started working remotely again, taking small freelance design projects. Some mornings, she even hummed while making coffee. Seeing her reclaim pieces of herself gave me hope. But just when life started to feel steady, Ethan found another way to remind us he wasn't done. It was a Friday evening. The snow outside had turned to sleet, tapping softly against the windows. Clara sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through job listings, while I caught up on some reading. Her laptop dinged with a new email notification. She glanced at the screen, then froze. "Mom," she whispered. "It's from him." My chest tightened. "Don't open it. It's just a subject line," she said, voice shaking. "It says Merry Christmas from Ethan." My blood ran cold. "Forward it to Karen," I instructed. But Clara, trembling, clicked it open before I could stop her. The email contained only a video attachment and one short message. "Thought you'd like to see how I'm spending my holidays." Against my better judgment, I clicked the play button. The video started with darkness, then light flooded in, revealing Ethan standing outside. But not just anywhere. I recognized the setting immediately. Our street. He was in front of our house. The camera panned slowly toward my living room window. "You look cozy in there," Ethan said, his voice calm, almost cheerful. "Don't worry, I'm not coming in. Not tonight." He chuckled, the sound sharp and cruel. "Just wanted to remind you can't hide from me. Not you, not your mother." My hands went numb. I paused the video, my reflection staring back at me on the screen. "He was here," I whispered. "He filmed this from our yard." Clara began to cry, her shoulders shaking. He could have come in." I pulled her close. "He didn't. And he won't. Not again." But inside, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. My first instinct was to call the police again, but something deeper burned in me a need to stop running. "He wants us terrified," I said, more to myself than to her. "Fine. Then he's going to learn what it feels like to be hunted." I grabbed my phone and replayed the video, studying every detail, the snow, the time, the faint reflection of his car headlights in the background. He thought he was in control, but I was done being afraid. This time, I was going to end it no matter what it took. Seeing Ethan's face on that screen made my blood run cold. He was taunting us. I stared at the paused frame for what felt like forever, his grin frozen mid-laugh, a cruel reminder of how much power he still thought he had. Clara sat beside me, tears streaking her cheeks, whispering, "He was right there, Mom." Outside. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but my throat was tight, words strangled by fear and rage. I grabbed my phone and called the detective again. "He filmed us," I said the second he answered. "Outside my home. I have the video." He told me to email it immediately and promised to send a patrol car. I did as he asked, then forwarded the email to Karen too. My fingers shook so hard I could barely type. When I hit send, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for hours. 15 minutes later, flashing lights painted the walls again. 2 officers stepped inside, calm but alert. They reviewed the footage on my laptop. "That's recent," one murmured. "Look at the timestamp, less than 2 hours ago." The younger officer went out to sweep the yard while the other stayed to question us. "We'll push for a warrant tonight," he assured me. "He's violated his bail conditions multiple times now. This video might be enough." I nodded numbly, clutching my robe around me, but inside my chest, something darker stirred. Fear was being replaced by anger, deep, protective, mother's anger. After the officers left, Clara sat silently by the fire, staring into the flames. "Mom," she said finally, "I can't live like this. I can't keep waiting for him to show up." "You won't have to," I told her. "They'll arrest him again." But she shook her head. "Even if they do, he'll get out. He always gets out." Her voice cracked. "What if he hurts you next time?" I went to her, kneeling so our eyes met. "He's not winning again," I said. "Not now, not ever." I wanted her to see the conviction in my face, to believe it even if I wasn't entirely sure myself. A few days passed in tense silence. Patrol cars circled the neighborhood more often, but we rarely saw the same one twice. Clara stayed home, afraid to go anywhere alone. I spent the nights sitting up with a cup of coffee, watching the front window. I'd never been a religious woman, but I prayed that he would be caught before he could come any closer. Then, one evening, as snow began to fall again, I was stirring a pot of soup when I heard a faint crunch outside. I froze, ladle midair. Clara looked up from the couch. "Mom?" Did you hear that? We both moved to the window. At first, I saw nothing, just white flakes drifting through the porch light. Then, behind the glow, something shifted. A shape. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was out there. My breath caught. I turned off the lights inside so we could see better through the glass. The shadow moved closer, sliding along the side of the house. Clara grabbed my arm. "Call the police," she whispered. I nodded, dialing with shaking hands, whispering our address to the dispatcher. "Stay on the line," the operator said, her voice calm but urgent. Footsteps crunched closer, circling toward the back of the house. I could see the faint outline of a man's figure through the curtain, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. My chest tightened, my pulse thundering in my ears. "They're on their way," the operator said. "Don't open any doors." I crept toward the kitchen, heart pounding, and switched off every remaining light. The only sound was the wind until something metallic scraped against the back door. Clara gasped, covering her mouth. We stared toward the noise, frozen. Through the dim glass of the kitchen window, I saw a shadow shift, a man's silhouette bending down, his hand on the lock, and I knew Ethan was here. The back door rattled, and every muscle in my body tensed. It wasn't just a casual knock or a gust of wind, it was deliberate. The handle jerked once, twice, then again. Harder this time. Metal scraping against metal. Clara clutched my arm, her whole body trembling. "He's trying to get in," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's actually trying to get in." My mind raced, but training from years of motherhood kicked in, protect first, panic later. "Go upstairs," I hissed. "Lock yourself in the bathroom and don't come out until the police arrive." "Mom, go," I ordered. She hesitated, then ran up the stairs. Her footsteps soft but hurried. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the counter and positioned myself behind the kitchen island, every light in the house still off. My heart pounded so loud I thought he could hear it through the door. "Come on. Come on," I whispered, glancing at the clock. How long could it take for the police to get here? The handle stopped rattling. Silence. That was somehow worse. The quiet pressed against my ears like a scream. Then crash. The kitchen window shattered, spraying glass across the floor. I ducked down behind the island, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The cold wind rushed in, carrying snowflakes and the sound of boots crunching on broken glass. "Ethan!" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. "The police are on their way. Leave now while you still can." No response, just the slow, deliberate sound of someone stepping further into the kitchen. I peeked over the counter. There he was. His black coat was dusted with snow, his face pale and twisted in fury. He looked less human and more like something hollowed out by hatred. "You shouldn't have called them," he said quietly. His voice was eerily calm, almost casual. "You took everything from me, Martha. Everything." "You did that yourself," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. "You broke her. You tried to break me." He laughed bitterly. "You think she's innocent? She ruined my life. She made me crazy." "No," I said, standing to face him fully now. "You were already broken long before you met her." He took a step closer, and I gripped the flashlight tighter. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Clara," he called out. "Come here, baby. Let's talk." "Don't you dare say her name," I snapped. "You're not her husband anymore, you're just a coward hiding behind threats." For the first time, his confidence faltered. His eyes darted to the hallway, then back to me. "You think this ends with a piece of paper?" he sneered. "I'll find her no matter where she goes." I took a step forward. "You're not finding anyone tonight." Just then, distant sirens wailed, faint but unmistakable. His head jerked toward the sound. "Too late," I said coldly. "They're coming for you." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He lunged toward me, but I swung the flashlight with all my strength. It struck his arm with a dull thud, and he cursed in pain, stumbling back into the counter. Before he could recover, red and blue lights flashed through the window, and a booming voice shouted, "Police, drop it and get on the ground." Ethan froze. He looked from me to the shattered window, calculating. But the front door burst open before he could move. 2 officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Down, now," they ordered. He raised his hands slowly, breathing heavily, rage still burning in his eyes. Within seconds, he was face down on the floor, handcuffs clicking tight around his wrists. As they dragged him outside, I finally let out a sob I'd been holding for months. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her face. "Is he?" "He's gone," I said, my voice breaking with relief. I pulled her into my arms, trembling with adrenaline. The officers promised to take him into custody with no bail this time, pending multiple charges. As the police car disappeared down the snowy street, I held my daughter close, her heart beat fast against mine. For the first time in years, the house felt still not empty. Not broken, just safe. But deep down, I knew healing from a man like Ethan would be its own battle. Weeks later, as snow melted into spring, the ghosts of that winter still lingered. Ethan was gone, locked behind bars this time without the luxury of bail. The court hearing had been brief, and the evidence we'd gathered, the video, the texts, the snow globe, the forced entry left the judge with little doubt. Watching the officers escort him away in cuffs should have been the end of it, but healing doesn't follow courtroom schedules. The fear he planted didn't vanish overnight, it just changed shape. Clara and I began therapy through a trauma recovery program Karen recommended. At first, Clara barely spoke during sessions, her hands twisting in her lap, her eyes always darting toward the door. But over time, she began to open up about the control, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of her confidence. I listened to every word, hating myself for not having seen the signs sooner. Our therapist reminded me that abusers thrive in silence, and guilt only feeds their legacy. I tried to believe that. We spent the following months rebuilding our lives one quiet day at a time. Clara found a new job working remotely for a small art studio, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile without fear behind it. I decided to sell my old house, too many memories clinging to its walls, and move us to a small place in a different neighborhood. It wasn't far, but it was fresh, untouched by Ethan's shadow. The new house had a large garden and big, sun-filled windows. Clara painted the kitchen yellow, saying she wanted light everywhere. We adopted a rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever we named Benny, whose tail never stopped wagging. He became Clara's silent protector, sleeping at her feet and growling softly whenever someone walked too close to the house. At night, his steady breathing comforted me more than any lock ever could. The neighbors were kind. A retired couple next door brought us muffins the first week, and a single mom across the street often waved when we passed. It wasn't much, but it felt like a community, a safety net of small kindnesses. Slowly, laughter returned to our home. Clara even started painting again. Her canvases had changed. Gone were the dark, stormy colors that once dominated her art. Now her paintings glowed with soft blues, greens, and warm golds. It felt symbolic, like watching her soul reclaim its color, but trauma doesn't disappear neatly. There were still nights when she'd wake from nightmares, clutching her chest, convinced she'd heard Ethan's voice. I'd hold her until she calmed down, whispering, "He can't reach you anymore." And though I meant it, part of me still checked the locks twice before going to bed. As spring deepened, we decided to unpack the last few boxes we'd ignored since moving. They'd been shoved into the closet of the spare room, old memories we hadn't been ready to face. Clara turned on some music, humming softly as we sorted through the items. Framed photos, folded blankets, boxes of Christmas decorations. For the first time in years, we could talk about Christmas without tears. "Next year," Clara said with a smile, "we'll host it here. Just us. No drama, no fear." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. I reached for a small cardboard box at the back of the closet. It was heavier than it looked, taped shut. "What's this?" I asked. Clara frowned. "I don't know. I thought we packed everything." I peeled back the tape and froze. Inside, nestled between old ornaments and wrapping paper, was a snow globe, the same one Ethan had sent weeks ago. The photo of them inside was gone, but the base was identical. the cracks faintly visible under the glass. My breath caught. How did this get here? Clara's face drained of color. Mom, we gave that to the police. I know, I whispered. My fingers trembled as I set it down. We stared at the globe, neither of us speaking. Outside, the wind rattled the window gently, like a reminder that even when storms pass, their echoes remain. And in that quiet room, surrounded by sunlight and spring air, I couldn't tell if the chill running down my spine came from fear or from finally realizing how deep Ethan's reach had truly gone. Holding that snow globe felt like holding a piece of our nightmare, but this time, it didn't control me. I picked it up carefully, turning it over in my hands. The cracks on the glass seemed to catch the sunlight, scattering it like tiny reminders of everything we'd endured. Clara stood beside me, silent, her eyes wide and wary. Mom, she whispered, do we destroy it? I nodded slowly. Yes, this is the last piece of him in our lives. We stepped outside into the warm spring air, the snow. The globe glinted in my palm as I held it above the flower bed we had planted together just a few weeks earlier. Clara shivered, but it wasn't from cold. Her hands trembled with the mixture of fear, anger, and relief. Ready? I asked. She nodded. Together, we dropped the globe onto the paving stones. It shattered with a satisfying crack, water and glass scattering among the flowers. I felt a weight lift off my chest, and I glanced at Clara. She exhaled a shaky laugh, the first real one I'd heard in months. It was small but genuine, like sunlight piercing through a long winter of fear. We cleaned up the pieces carefully, making sure no shards were left behind. It felt symbolic picking up the fragments of our past, acknowledging the damage, but choosing to move forward anyway. I held Clara close afterward, brushing her hair away from her face. It's over, I whispered. No more him. No more fear. She buried her head in my shoulder. I know, Mom. I finally believe it. The weeks that followed felt surreal. Without Ethan looming over our lives, we had space to breathe, to heal, to rebuild. Clara threw herself into her art, painting large canvases full of color and life. She even began sharing her work online, receiving small commissions and messages of encouragement from strangers who admired her talent. Every smile, every laugh, every tiny victory reminded me that she was no longer a victim. We spent the next Christmas differently. No trees lit with someone else's judgment, no awkward silences, no fear of cold wind or locked doors. Just us, and the warmth of our home, filled with laughter and music. Clara hung ornaments she had painted herself, each one a testament to her regained strength. We baked cookies together, spilling flour across the kitchen counter and laughing when Benny the dog tried to snatch a cookie off the cooling rack. I thought about how far we had come from that night. She stood frozen in the snow, to the shattering of the globe, to this moment, surrounded by safety and love. Every step had been hard, but we had made it. And yet, I knew healing was not a straight line. There would still be nights when shadows of fear crept into our minds. But now, those shadows had no power over us. We could acknowledge them, face them, and let them pass. I looked at Clara as she carried a plate of cookies to the living room, her laugh echoing through the house. I felt a swell of pride. I hadn't known I could carry pride not just in her survival, but in her courage to live fully again. I'll never let him take that from you again, I whispered to her silently. We stood at the window together, watching snowflakes from an unexpected late spring flurry dance across the garden. Light glinted on the shattered pieces of the snow globe we had left behind. But instead of fear, it felt like a promise that even when broken, we could create something stronger, brighter, and new. That Christmas, as the snow fell softly and the warmth of the house wrapped around us, I realized that no storm, no threat, no man, no fear could ever freeze a mother's love again. We had survived, we had rebuilt, and we were free. The nightmare was over. And this time, our lives belonged to us alone.